The paradox of the blind craftsman. Something is fundamentally wrong with our everyday understanding of reality, yet almost no one stops to notice it. At this exact second, your brain is showing you a rich, vibrant, three-dimensional world, but it has never actually seen that world. Not once, not for a single moment of your life, has your brain directly touched the light of the sun or heard the sound of the ocean. Instead, it sits in total darkness, sealed inside the silent chamber of your skull. It is completely blind and deaf, an isolated biological organ tasked with building everything you call real out of ambiguous electrical pulses it has to guess the meaning of. Somehow, from this absolute isolation, it effortlessly renders the entire expansive universe you are inhabiting right now, the great synchronization. Here is where the architecture of experience becomes truly strange. My brain is doing the exact same thing, and so is the brain of every human being on Earth. We are a planet of billions of isolated consciousnesses, each locked away in its own private, pitch-black skull. Yet somehow every single one of us is generating the same world, at the same time, in perfect coordination. If reality were purely an objective landscape that we passively record, this wouldn't be a mystery. But science reveals a different story. If we are all privately generating our experiences from scratch, how are our independent brains keeping the show in sync? Why do you and I look at the same patch of sky and agree that it is blue? Or point at the same cup and agree that it exists? The controlled hallucination. To understand this coordination, we must first dismantle the childhood myth of perception. We grow up believing our eyes are clear glass windows through which the outside world streams. In reality, the moment photons strike the back of your retina, the light stops dead. It never travels any deeper into your head. What journeys down the optic nerve is not light, but electricity. Tiny, identical chemical and voltage spikes firing across neurons in the dark. There is no picture being sent to your brain, only a stream of raw, meaningless code. Cognitive scientists like Anil Seth describe what happens next as a controlled hallucination. Your brain takes this raw data and invents the depth, the movement, the textures and the colors to create a seamless best-guess simulation of what is out there. The deceptive desktop interface. If our brains are simply guessing, what exactly are they guessing about? Cognitive scientist Donald Hoffman offers an elegant answer through his interface theory of perception. Think of the icons on your computer desktop. A little blue rectangle represents a text document, and a tiny trash can represents deleted files. You click on them, move them, and interact with them as if they are real objects. But you know that there is no miniature plastic trash can inside your laptop. Underneath the interface lies a chaotic reality of voltage shifts, silicon transistors, and millions of shifting ones and zeros. The desktop icon is a useful lie. It was designed by software engineers to hide the actual complexity of the computer, so that you could use the machine without your mind short-circuiting. Evolution's useful shortcut. Now apply this metaphor to your entire life. The tree in your front yard is not inherently a tree in its raw form. The face of someone you love is not a face. Your own physical body is not a body. They are biological desktop icons. They are highly simplified, useful symbols generated by your nervous system to help you safely navigate an underlying reality that, in its raw form, would be entirely unrecognizable, overwhelming, and unbearable to perceive directly. Evolution did not design human senses to see absolute truth. It designed us to survive, find food, and avoid predators. A creature that paused to process the true, infinite complexity of objective reality would be far too slow and distracted to survive. Nature gave us a clean, manageable shortcut, and we mistook the interface for the world itself, the multiplicity of realities. We can see the subjective nature of this interface by looking at the animal kingdom. A honeybee looks at a flower and sees intricate ultraviolet patterns that are completely invisible to human eyes. A pit viper navigates the night by sensing heat maps through infrared vision. A mantis shrimp possesses 16 color-receptive cones to our 3, perceiving colors that do not even exist in human language or imagination. All of these creatures are interacting with the exact same physical space, Yet none of them are seeing the same world. Which version of the flower or the room is the true, ultimate reality? The honest scientific answer is none of them. Each creature is looking at its own custom-built interface, meaning the raw world underneath looks like nothing any biological eye has ever experienced. The breakdown of the materialist model. This brings us back to the sharpest edge of the paradox. If your sensory interface is completely private, built inside your unique skull and custom-fitted to your specific nervous system, why does it match mine? If we were hallucinating entirely independently, our worlds should be mismatched. You would perceive a solid brick wall where I see an open doorway, resulting in immediate chaos. For 300 years, classical science operated under the comforting assumption that a solid, independent, and indifferent world existed out there on its own, and our brains were just taking identical photographs of it. This materialist model built modern civilization, engines, and medicine. Yet over the last century, physics looked deeper into the foundation of matter and found that this solid world does not behave like a world at all. The observer in the quantum fog. The cracking of the materialist foundation began with the famous double-slit experiment. When physicists fired subatomic particles like electrons through two narrow openings, the particles did not land in straight lines like tiny physical tennis balls. Instead, they acted like waves of probability, passing through both slits simultaneously and creating an interference pattern. Most remarkably, when scientists placed a physical detector at the slits to observe which path each electron actually took, the behavior instantly changed. The moment observation entered the equation, the wave of possibilities collapsed, and the electrons began acting like solid, predictable little balls again. The act of looking forced a fluid reality to make up its mind, the fabric of pure potential. The implications of quantum mechanics are profound enough that physicists have spent a century trying to find mathematical escape routes to avoid the obvious conclusion. In the cleanest scientific language possible, the data states that at the deepest level of nature, physical objects do not possess definite properties until they are observed. Reality, down at its bedrock, is not a collection of hard, fixed objects. It is a fog of probabilities, a vast, formless, vibrating sea of potential. It is consciousness that reaches into this fog and collapses the wave function into a specific room, a specific chair, and a specific moment. You are not a passive spectator watching an already finished universe. You are actively participating in the exact moment it becomes real. The spooky truth of entanglement. If independent observers were responsible for collapsing their own independent realities, our world should still be hopelessly out of alignment. Physics, however, provides another clue through the phenomenon of quantum entanglement. When two particles are connected at their origin, a change made to one instantly changes the other, even if they are placed on opposite sides of the universe. No signal travels between them, and there is no time delay. They behave as if the distance between them does not exist. Albert Einstein famously rejected this, calling it spooky action at a distance, yet it has been proven true in thousands of modern experiments. Entanglement tells us that separation is an illusion of the interface. At the foundational level, the universe is not built of isolated pieces, but of unified relationships. Flipping the hard problem. If separation is an illusion and reality requires an observer to exist, the materialist view cracks open completely. For decades, science has stayed quiet about the hard problem of consciousness, the complete inability to explain how a piece of wet meat like the brain, made of cold cells and chemicals, can suddenly produce a subjective feeling like the color red, or the emotion of love. No one has ever bridged that gap, and perhaps we never will, unless we flip the entire problem around. What if consciousness was never produced by the brain at all? What if consciousness is the primary, fundamental fabric of everything, and matter is simply what shows up inside of it, the exact same way images show up inside a nightly dream? The idealist alternative. This philosophical shift, championed by contemporary thinkers like Bernardo Kastrup under the banner of analytic idealism, is far more scientifically economical than classical materialism. Materialism requires us to invent a secondary substance called matter, and then invent a magical, unexplained process to get mind out of it. Idealism requires only one ingredient, an underlying field of awareness. Every human perspective is a single window looking out at the exact same scene. The reason your blue matches my blue, and the reason we can sit at the same table and pass the salt without confusion, is not because we are copying a solid outside world. It is because there is only one fundamental scene being shown, and only one consciousness looking, the great search for the self. If the universe is a singular consciousness looking through billions of biological windows, an unavoidable question arises. Who have you actually been your whole life? We all live with the intuitive feeling that there is a permanent, separate self sitting somewhere behind our foreheads, a little pilot inside the skull who watches our thoughts, experiences our feelings, and makes our decisions. Yet, neuroscience has scanned every millimeter of the brain, traced every neural pathway, and come back entirely empty-handed. There is no central command room in the brain. There is no little person sitting behind your eyes. There are only billions of decentralized neurological processes firing simultaneously, generating a story so smooth and convincing that we mistake the story for a storyteller. The model of the protagonist centuries ago, the philosopher David Hume tried to catch his own self in the act of being. He noticed that whenever he turned his attention inward, he only ever encountered a passing thought, a specific memory, or a physical sensation of warmth or cold. He could never find an actual thinker behind the thoughts. Modern neuroscience confirms this ancient observation. The self is not the author of your experience. It is just another character written into the script by your nervous system. The ego is simply another desktop icon designed by evolution to keep this specific biological body defended, fed, and alive. The radio analogy. To understand this relation, consider a radio on a table. The music you hear does not originate from inside the radio itself. The radio is not generating Beethoven from its wires. The musical signal is in the air everywhere around you, all the time, invisible and omnipresent. The radio simply tunes into a specific frequency and translates a localized piece of that signal into audible sound. If you damage the radio, the music distorts. If you smash it to pieces, the music stops playing through that specific device. Crucially, however, the symphony itself has not been destroyed. The signal remains perfectly intact, vibrating through the room, waiting for another receiver. Your brain is a biological receiver, tuning the one field of consciousness into the specific local frequency called you, the wave remembering the ocean. When the biological radio finally stops working, the individual tuning ends, but the awareness itself does not go anywhere. This realization dissolves the historical boundaries between self and other, observer and observed. Imagine an ocean covered with countless waves, each possessing a unique height, shape, and speed. You could easily give each wave a name, track its progress, and write its biography. Yet no wave is truly separate from the sea. A wave is simply a temporary shape the ocean is taking. The ocean is what is doing the waving. When a wave finally breaks upon the shore and settles, nothing is lost, and nothing dies. The water has simply stopped pretending to be a separate wave. The masks of the universe. You are the ocean of consciousness briefly taking the temporary shape of a human being. It is wearing your face, thinking your specific thoughts, and exploring existence through the lens of your life, while simultaneously doing the exact same thing through every other being on this planet. Every stranger you pass on the street, every friend you embrace, and every enemy you fear is the exact same awareness looking back at you from a slightly different angle. The boundaries feel incredibly real because they have to. If the wave constantly remembered it was the ocean, it could never fully experience the thrill, the drama, and the vulnerability of being a wave. The illusion of separateness is what gives our lives texture, grief, love, and meaning. Awakening from the script. This structural reality changes what it means to walk through the world. The low hum of comparison, the constant exhaustion of defending your reputation, and the anxiety of tracking how others perceive you, begin to loosen their grip when you realize your social life is a choreography of masks. You are no longer desperately protecting a fragile, isolated self from an indifferent universe. You are a localized point of a singular awareness, experiencing itself through contrast. When you look in the mirror, or into the eyes of a stranger, that flash of recognition is the universe peeking through its own eyes. The brain will continue to build its interface, and your life will continue its story, but underneath it all remains a quiet, unbreakable knowing. You are the reality you have been looking for the entire time.